Lieutenant! We need you!
The words weren't spoken to a decorated army officer, or a senior surgeon, or even the hospital director. They were spoken to the hospital's newest nurse, the one person nobody expected the Army to recognize. A woman who had been working at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center for less than 3 weeks. Most of the staff barely knew her name. Some still called her the quiet new nurse, which made what happened next completely impossible, because a 4-star Army commander remained standing in a perfect military salute, waiting for her answer. Emily Carter slowly looked up from the patient chart in her hands. She wore ordinary navy blue nursing scrubs, an RN badge clipped neatly to her pocket. Her hair was tied into a simple bun. Nothing about her suggested she had ever served in the military. Doctors stopped walking. Nurses froze beside their medication carts. Patients sitting in the waiting area turned toward the entrance. Even the soldiers who had arrived aboard the helicopter stood silently behind their commander. Nobody understood why a 1-star Army commander had ignored every doctor, every administrator, every military officer inside the hospital, only to salute the quiet new nurse everyone else overlooked. Emily finally broke the silence. "I retired 8 years ago." The commander never lowered his hand. His voice remained calm. "You retired from the Army." He paused. "Not from this mission." The emergency department fell completely silent. Nobody knew what he meant. Nobody knew who Emily Carter really was, and nobody could explain why a military helicopter had crossed 3 states just to find a nurse who had barely worked there a month. If you enjoy stories of hidden courage, quiet sacrifice, and extraordinary heroes history almost forgot, consider subscribing. We share a new story every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's go back 3 weeks, long before anyone discovered that the quiet new nurse had spent years trying to make sure the Army forgot her. Military hospitals had a rhythm unlike any other place. The days belonged to trauma teams, surgeons, specialists, military briefings, families waiting for good news. But the nights belonged to recovery. The hallways became quieter, the lights dimmed, footsteps echoed a little farther, machines spoke louder than people. The nurses who volunteered for those hours understood something most never did. Healing wasn't always measured by medicine. Sometimes, it was measured by simply staying beside someone who believed they'd been forgotten. Emily Carter always chose the night shift. Most people assumed it was because she preferred silence. The truth was far more complicated. Silence asked fewer questions. 3 weeks earlier, Emily had quietly joined Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. No welcoming ceremony, no introductions, no stories about her previous hospital. She simply arrived 15 minutes early for every shift, learned every patient's name, worked harder than anyone else, and disappeared before sunrise. Most of the staff knew almost nothing about her. They knew she never complained, never missed a shift, never took unnecessary breaks. She politely declined invitations to lunch, skipped birthday celebrations in the staff lounge, always smiled, but never spoke much about herself. One evening, a young nurse laughed while organizing patient files. "I've worked beside Emily for 3 weeks, and I still know less about her than I know about patients admitted yesterday." The others laughed. Emily simply smiled politely and continued preparing medication trays. She never seemed offended. She simply preferred listening over talking. There was, however, one small thing nobody could explain. Around her neck, hidden beneath her scrubs, Emily always wore an old pair of silver flight wings hanging from a thin chain. Most people assumed they were just sentimental jewelry. No one had ever seen her take them off, and no one had ever asked where they came from. Every morning before leaving the hospital, she quietly slipped the wings back beneath her uniform, almost as if she were hiding a part of herself she never wanted anyone to see. It wasn't long before everyone began describing her the same way, the quiet new nurse. Nobody realized that was exactly how Emily wanted it. She had spent years building a life where nobody recognized her, a life where patients saw only a nurse, not the person she used to be. One rainy evening, an elderly veteran recovering from surgery suddenly became confused. His heart rate climbed. He tried pulling away his oxygen tubing. Several nurses rushed into the room. "It's okay, sir, you're in the hospital." But the old man kept shaking his head. "They're still out there, we have to move." His breathing became faster. The room grew tense. Emily quietly stepped inside. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't try correcting him. She gently pulled the blanket back over his shoulders. Then she leaned close enough for only him to hear. "You're safe now." The old man's breathing slowed, but he still looked frightened. Emily noticed something nobody else had. His eyes weren't searching the room, they were searching the exits. She looked down. A faded army tattoo was barely visible beneath his hospital gown. Only then did she softly add, "You're safe now, Sergeant." Almost instantly, the old man's shoulders relaxed, his breathing slowed. Within seconds, his eyes closed. The room fell silent. One of the younger nurses stared at Emily. "How did you know he was a sergeant?" Emily smiled gently. "The tattoo." She paused. "And the way he kept checking the exits." Then she quietly walked away before anyone could ask another question. A few nights later, a retired Marine became frustrated because a young nurse accidentally called him soldier. Before anyone else noticed, Emily quietly stepped in. "He was a Marine." She smiled kindly. "They usually appreciate hearing the difference." The elderly man chuckled. "Now that's someone who pays attention." The young nurse laughed nervously. "I keep mixing them up." Emily smiled. "It happens." No explanation, no stories, just another small moment everyone quickly forgot. A week later, another patient arrived wearing an old field jacket folded neatly inside his duffel bag. Before the admission paperwork was even finished, Emily quietly asked, "82nd Airborne?" The veteran blinked. "How'd you know?" Emily pointed toward the faded shoulder patch. "It gave you away." The veteran laughed. "I haven't had anyone recognize that in years." Emily simply smiled and continued checking his medication. Little moments like that kept happening, each one so ordinary that nobody thought much about them. One clue never meant anything by itself, but together they quietly painted the outline of a life Emily refused to talk about. Every morning before leaving, she paused for just a few seconds in front of the hospital's memorial wall. She never stayed long, never spoke. She simply looked at the engraved names, then gently touched the silver flight wings beneath her scrubs, turned, and walked toward the exit. One morning, a maintenance worker happened to notice. "You know someone up there?" Emily looked at the wall. For just a moment, something changed in her eyes. Then she smiled. "I knew a lot of people." Before the man could ask another question, she picked up her bag and disappeared into the sunrise. He watched her leave. She looked less like someone finishing another shift and more like someone making sure the past stayed exactly where she had left it. None of them knew that in just a few hours, the past would come looking for her, and this time it would arrive in a military helicopter. 3 weeks passed without anything unusual happening. Emily arrived before every shift, left after every sunrise, and slowly became part of the hospital's routine. The quiet new nurse. Nothing more. Or so everyone believed. Then, on the 22nd evening, the routine ended. Emily was restocking emergency medications when a deep rumble echoed through the hospital. At first, no one paid much attention. Helicopters flew over Walter Reed almost every day. Patients barely looked up anymore. But this one didn't keep flying. It grew louder, much louder. The windows began to vibrate. Coffee rippled inside paper cups. The automatic glass doors trembled against their frames. A receptionist frowned. Is it landing? Nobody answered. Outside, hospital security officers suddenly lifted radios to their mouths. 2 military police vehicles rolled toward the front entrance. Doctors walking between departments slowed. Several patients stood near the windows. The sound became deafening. Then, the unmistakable silhouette of a massive Black Hawk appeared above the hospital. It descended directly onto the hospital helipad. Rotor wash exploded across the entrance. Leaves, dust, rainwater, loose paperwork, everything scattered through the air. Inside, the emergency department fell silent. One young nurse whispered, "Who's coming?" An older doctor adjusted his glasses. Must be somebody important. Everyone expected trauma patients, perhaps a wounded general, or an emergency evacuation. Instead, the helicopter door opened. 6 heavily equipped army soldiers jumped onto the pavement. Within seconds, they formed 2 perfectly straight lines leading toward the hospital entrance. No one spoke. Then, a senior army commander stepped onto the pavement. His silver hair was visible beneath his service cap. Rows of ribbons covered his dress uniform. 4 silver stars reflected beneath the landing lights. Every soldier immediately stood at attention. The automatic doors slid open. Hospital administrators rushed forward. "General, welcome." The commander walked past them without saying a word. He ignored the chief surgeon, ignored the hospital director, ignored every senior officer waiting to greet him. His eyes searched only one face, Emily Carter. She was still standing beside the medication counter, clipboard in her hands, completely unaware that every person inside the hospital was now looking at her. The commander walked directly toward her, stopped exactly 6 feet away. Then, without hesitation, he raised his hand into a flawless military salute. Every soldier behind him saluted at the exact same moment. A patient dropped a magazine onto the floor. A nurse accidentally let a medication tray slip from her hands. The crash echoed through the silent department. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody understood. The commander looked directly into Emily's eyes. His voice remained calm. "Lieutenant." A long pause. Then, "We need you." Emily closed her eyes, almost as though she had been expecting this day for years. When she finally opened them, she quietly said, "I told the army never to come looking for me." The commander's expression never changed. "We honored that request." He paused. "Until today." Every person in the emergency department looked from the commander back to Emily, then back again. Nobody had ever heard anyone call her lieutenant. Nobody had ever imagined the quiet new nurse had any connection to the military. One young nurse whispered, "Who is she?" No one answered. The commander finally broke the silence. "Ma'am, we've run out of time." Emily didn't respond. The commander took a slow breath. "They've been waiting for you." For the first time since the helicopter landed, Emily's expression changed. She slowly turned toward the Black Hawk waiting outside. Its rotors were still spinning. Its crew remained inside, ready to leave at a moment's notice. She already knew. Before the commander said another word, she quietly asked, "How many are still alive?" The commander lowered his eyes. 12. Emily closed her eyes again, not in fear, in recognition. Because before the commander had explained anything, she already knew exactly which mission had come back to find her. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The commander and Emily stood facing each other in complete silence. Outside, the Black Hawk continued roaring on the helipad. Its spinning rotors rattled the hospital windows every few seconds. The urgency was obvious, yet the commander never tried to rush her. He simply waited, as though he already understood this wasn't a decision that could be ordered. It had to be chosen. Emily finally looked at him. "You promised." The commander nodded once. "I did. You told me no one would ever come looking for me. We kept that promise." She searched his face. "So what changed?" The commander's voice became quieter. "We lost contact 6 hours ago." Emily remained silent. The rescue team found them. She still didn't respond, but the evacuation never happened. For the first time, Emily's expression changed. "Why?" The commander took a slow breath. "They refused." Several doctors exchanged confused looks. They refused to board the helicopter. Emily frowned. "That doesn't make any sense." "They gave us one condition." The room became so quiet, even the helicopter outside seemed distant. The commander looked directly into her eyes. "They said," a long pause, "send Lieutenant Emily Carter." No one spoke. The words seemed to hang in the air. A young nurse whispered, "Lieutenant what?" Another quietly asked, "Who's Lieutenant Emily Carter?" The commander answered without taking his eyes off Emily, "You're looking at her." Several nurses instinctively turned toward Emily, the woman who quietly stocked medication shelves, who skipped birthday celebrations, who always volunteered for the overnight shift, had somehow become the only person 12 American soldiers trusted with their lives. Emily spoke so softly, only the commander heard her. "They're alive?" "Barely. They've been holding their position since yesterday. The weather is closing in. We may only have one chance left." Emily slowly looked toward the helicopter waiting outside. Its engines had never been shut down. The crew was still inside, ready to leave the moment she answered. One of the younger nurses finally found her voice. "Emily?" She hesitated. "Were you really in the army?" Emily didn't answer. Instead, she reached beneath the collar of her scrubs. Very slowly, she pulled out the old silver flight wings that had rested against her chest every single day. For the first time, everyone saw them clearly. The wings were scratched. Their silver had faded with age. The edges were worn smooth by years of being carried. They weren't decorative. They had been earned. One of the soldiers standing behind the commander instinctively stood a little straighter. Another quietly lowered his head. The commander looked at the wings for several long seconds. "I knew you never threw them away." Emily gently ran her thumb across the faded metal. "I never found a reason to." The commander slowly removed a weathered military envelope from inside his uniform. The paper was faded, creased, its edges softened by time. He handed it to Emily. The moment she saw the handwriting, her hands began to tremble. She recognized it instantly. Very carefully, she unfolded the letter. Inside, there was only one sentence, no signature, no explanation, just 7 words. "If anything happens, send Lieutenant Carter." Emily stared at the page. The emergency department disappeared around her. The sound of the helicopter faded. The voices vanished. For one brief moment, she wasn't standing inside Walter Reed anymore. She was remembering a name, a mission, and 12 faces she had spent 8 years trying to bury. She slowly folded the letter, closed her eyes, then whispered, almost to herself, "Operation Guardian." The commander looked at her. "It never really ended." Emily opened her eyes. For the first time since the helicopter landed, the quiet new nurse everyone knew was gone. Standing in her place was someone the army had never forgotten, and someone 12 soldiers still believed would come back for them. Emily never took her eyes off the letter. The faded paper trembled slightly between her fingers, not because she was afraid, because she recognized the handwriting. The commander quietly folded his hands behind his back. "I kept my promise." Emily looked at him. "I never told anyone where you were. I never asked you to come back. I never even tried to contact you." His voice became quieter. "But this letter," he glanced toward the helicopter waiting outside, "this changed everything." Emily carefully folded the paper. "When did you find it?" 3 days ago." "Where?" The commander reached beneath his arm and unfolded a weatherproof military map across the reception counter. A red circle marked a remote mountain valley. Emily didn't need to read the name. She already knew it, because suddenly the hospital disappeared. Rain slammed against the windshield of a Black Hawk helicopter. Warning alarms screamed through the cockpit. Smoke poured through the cabin. The aircraft lurched violently. A young medic shouted, "We've lost hydraulic pressure." Another soldier yelled, "We've got 12 wounded." The pilot fought the controls. "We can only take half." The helicopter touched down hard, rotor blades still spinning. Bullets echoed in the distance. Chaos surrounded them. One by one, the wounded were loaded aboard. The pilot looked toward Emily. "Lieutenant, we're overloaded. You have to get on." Emily looked around. 12 injured soldiers still lay scattered across the rocky mountainside. Some couldn't stand. Some couldn't even speak. She removed her helmet, handed it to the youngest medic beside her. "Take them." The pilot stared. "Lieutenant!" "That's an order." Emily shook her head. "No." She picked up another medical bag. "If anyone stays, it'll be me." The medic grabbed her arm. "You'll never make it." Emily smiled. "Neither will they unless someone stays." The pilot hesitated, then slowly nodded. The helicopter lifted away. Its rotor wash disappeared into the freezing rain. The sound grew quieter, until Emily stood alone. 12 wounded soldiers, 1 medic, no radio, no guarantee another helicopter would ever return. Emily looked around at the frightened faces, then smiled. "Looks like you're stuck with me?" One of the wounded soldiers actually laughed. The fear in their eyes eased. For the next 36 hours, she became far more than a nurse. She splinted broken bones with helicopter wreckage, used torn uniforms as bandages, collected rainwater when IV fluids ran out, never slept, never stopped moving. When the rescue helicopter finally returned, every wounded soldier boarded first. Emily climbed aboard last, unconscious, hypothermic, barely alive. The flashback vanished. Emily blinked. She was standing inside Walter Reed once again. The hospital lobby was silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Several nurses had tears in their eyes. One doctor quietly removed his glasses. The commander looked at Emily. None of those 12 men ever forgot who stayed behind. He gently placed something on the reception counter. The old silver lieutenant bars. Their edges were scratched, faded by time. "You left these inside the wreckage." Emily stared at them. She hadn't seen them in 8 years. "I thought they were gone." "So did we." The commander slowly slid them toward her. "They belong to you." Emily didn't reach for them. Instead, she asked the one question no one else had thought to ask. "What happened to the 12 men?" The commander smiled. "They all made it home." Emily closed her eyes. A slow breath escaped her lips. For the first time since the helicopter landed, she smiled too. Then the commander's expression turned serious again. "They survived once because you refused to leave them." He looked toward the helicopter waiting outside. "Today, they're asking if you'll do it one more time." The entire hospital waited, not for an order, not for a salute, but for the answer only the quiet new nurse could give. The emergency department remained completely silent. No one looked away. Not the doctors, not the nurses, not even the patients waiting to be treated. Every eye was fixed on Emily Carter. The quiet new nurse, the woman no one had truly noticed just 3 weeks earlier. Emily looked down at the silver lieutenant bars resting on the reception counter. For 8 years, she had convinced herself that chapter of her life was over. She had traded helicopters for hospital hallways, battlefield medicine for quiet night shifts. She had spent years becoming invisible, and now the past had landed outside her front door. She looked through the glass entrance. The Black Hawk waited, its rotors still spinning, its crew still ready. 8 years earlier, she had climbed onto a helicopter believing she'd return before sunrise. Instead, she had spent 36 hours wondering if anyone would ever find them again. Her fingers tightened around the silver lieutenant bars. Then she slowly looked back toward the emergency department. A little boy sitting in a wheelchair smiled and gave her a small wave. Room 214, the elderly veteran she had comforted the night before, was sleeping peacefully. The unfinished patient chart still rested beside her hospital ID badge. 2 very different worlds, both waiting for her. One needed a nurse, the other needed the lieutenant she believed she had left behind forever. For one long moment, neither world moved, neither asked twice. The commander never interrupted. He understood. Some decisions couldn't be made by rank, only by conscience. Finally, Emily picked up the lieutenant bars. She didn't pin them to her scrubs. She simply closed her hand around them. Then she looked directly at the commander. "I'm not coming because I'm a lieutenant." She glanced toward the helicopter. "I'm coming because they're still my patients." For the first time since arriving, the commander smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Emily reached for her hospital ID badge. She carefully unclipped it from her pocket, then placed it beside the unfinished patient chart. The medication tray she had been preparing was still waiting. She turned toward the charge nurse. "Room 214 needs his antibiotics at 7. The charge nurse nodded, struggling to hold back tears. Emily smiled gently. "And don't let him skip breakfast again." A few nurses laughed softly through watery eyes. Even now, she was thinking about someone else before herself. Emily reached beneath the collar of her scrubs. The old silver flight wings slipped into view once more. The commander noticed them immediately. "You still wear them?" Emily gently touched the worn metal. "They remind me why I came home." She tucked the wings safely beneath her scrubs again, then looked at the commander. One steady breath. "Take me to them." Without another word, she walked toward the hospital entrance. Every person inside the emergency department instinctively stepped aside. No one had been asked to move. It simply felt wrong to stand in her way. As Emily reached the doorway, the commander stepped aside instead of walking ahead of her, giving her the path. Outside, the 6 soldiers immediately stood at attention. Then, without a single command, every one of them raised a perfect military salute. Not because of her rank alone. They were saluting the woman who had refused to leave 12 wounded soldiers behind. Emily paused. She looked at each of them. Then, very slowly, she returned the salute. The Black Hawk's engines roared louder. She climbed aboard. The cabin door closed. Seconds later, the helicopter lifted into the evening sky. Inside the hospital, no one spoke. One elderly veteran sitting quietly in the waiting area watched the helicopter disappear beyond the horizon. A young nurse standing beside him whispered, "Who was she?" The old veteran smiled. His eyes never left the sky. "The kind of hero," he paused, "who spends her whole life hoping nobody ever finds out." The helicopter disappeared into the fading sunset.
But for everyone who had witnessed it, the quiet new nurse would never again be just another face in navy blue scrubs. She had always been extraordinary. She had simply chosen an ordinary life.
The Black Hawk returned just before sunrise. Its rotors slowed as the helicopter settled onto the hospital helipad. Inside the emergency department, no one had slept. Doctors continued working. Patients continued arriving. But every few minutes, someone glanced toward the entrance, waiting. The helicopter door finally opened. Emily Carter stepped down first, still wearing the same navy blue scrubs beneath a borrowed flight jacket. She looked exhausted. There was dried dirt on her sleeves, a small bandage wrapped around one hand, but she was smiling. Behind her, 12 soldiers slowly walked down the ramp, every one of them alive. Some leaned on crutches, others had bandages shoulders, one carried his arm in a sling. Yet every one of them stopped before entering the hospital. Without anyone giving an order, all 12 turned toward Emily. Then, one after another, they saluted. Not a rushed military courtesy, a slow, perfect, silent salute. The commander watched without saying a word. Emily looked almost embarrassed. "You don't have to do that." One of the soldiers smiled. "Actually, ma'am, we do." Another stepped forward. 8 years ago, he had been the youngest soldier trapped during Operation Guardian. His voice was steadier now. "You told us that no one gets left behind." He looked around at the 11 men standing beside him. "You kept that promise. We've spent 8 years trying to thank you." Emily lowered her eyes. "I only did my job." The soldier smiled. "No, ma'am, you did ours too." Silence settled over the helipad. The commander finally spoke. "There was a recommendation for another medal." Emily looked up immediately. "No, you haven't even heard." "No." He smiled knowingly. "I thought you'd say that." Emily looked toward the hospital entrance. Through the glass, she could already see nurses beginning another shift, patients waiting to be seen, doctors reviewing charts. "My patients are waiting." She quietly removed the borrowed flight jacket, folded it carefully, and handed it back. Then she reached into her pocket. The silver lieutenant bars rested in her palm. For a long moment, she looked at them, then at the old silver flight wings hanging beneath her scrubs. The commander watched silently. Emily smiled. "The bars belong to the past." She gently placed them into the commander's hand. "But the reason I earned them comes with me." She tucked the silver flight wings safely back beneath her scrubs, picked up her clipboard from the reception desk, adjusted her stethoscope around her neck, and walked back toward room 214. The same patient she had left only hours earlier looked up as she entered. "There you are." Emily smiled exactly as she always had. "Sorry for the delay." She checked his IV, adjusted his blanket, asked how he was feeling, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. The young nurse watching from the doorway couldn't hold back anymore. "Emily," she hesitated, "were you really a lieutenant?" Emily looked at her for a moment, then smiled. "Today, I'm just your co-worker." The young nurse laughed. "I don't think anyone's ever called you the quiet new nurse again." Emily chuckled softly. "I hope they still call me a good nurse." Outside, the commander looked through the hospital window one final time. He watched Emily disappear into another patient's room. A faint smile crossed his face. He quietly whispered, "Lieutenant." A brief pause. Mission complete. The Black Hawk slowly lifted into the morning sky. Inside the hospital, Emily Carter continued her rounds, checking medications, comforting patients, listening more than she spoke, exactly as she had before. Most of the new patients would never know who she was, and if Emily had her way, they never would. Because the greatest heroes aren't remembered for the medals they receive. They're remembered by the lives that quietly continue because they were there.